Rucira. So Rucira is an ST1 trainee. So for those of you who don't know, she completed foundation training, which is the sort of residency that you do after you complete medical school. And now she's in specialty training in Obs and Gynae. And she is in St. Mary's Hospital in Manchester, just like Jean. And then she's been putting on the chat how lovely the nightlife is in Manchester, and she has so many tips on NHS and her adaptation to the system. She has received over like 35 prizes, awards. You know, she's super engaged in international and national groups. She is actually the founder of CHIPS, you know, that is doing so well in presenting this talk to you today. So she has loads of tips to give you on her adaptation to the NHS system and how she has progressed through her career, and options for you as well, so that you can really thrive in your NHS pathway. Over to you, Rucira.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction, Amanda. I'm flattered.
No, honestly, she's amazing, guys. So
can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. So yeah, my name is Rucira, and I'm currently an ST1 in Obs and Gynae at St. Mary's Hospital in Manchester. And today I'll be talking more about understanding the NHS, where we'll be talking about the pros and cons of working in the NHS, what it's like to be a doctor working in the UK as well. And I'll go through some of the nitty-gritty details of what you need to do when you start working as well. Okay, so just a brief introductory slide of who am I. So as Amanda has said, yep, I was a Cardiff University student, graduated in 2019, and then I started F1 and F2 in Wales as well. Because I found the transition from medical school to working life much easier if you stayed in the same deanery. So not many changes in regards to like passports or like BRPs and driving license and all that, where you need to change address, and yeah, a hassle, which I realized once I moved to Manchester. But yeah, normally we would recommend students to stay in the same deanery after they graduate, so that the transition is much easier into F1 and F2, which is what I did. Okay, so we will be talking about what happens after graduation. So we'll be talking about visas, tips about relocation, so moving from one deanery to another. We'll be talking briefly about career pathways as well, working in the NHS, and to go in deeper to talk about the different types or levels of care in the NHS, and also the pros and cons of working in the NHS as an international medical student or graduate. Okay, so what happens after graduation? I'm afraid that's when you start to become a true adult. So I've got this term here from the Merriam-Webster definition of adulting. It basically means that it's the practice of behaving in a way characteristic of a responsible adult, especially the accomplishment of mundane but necessary tasks. So that means not only taking care about your food, your transport, and your day-to-day task, but also being able to handle your stuff like petrol, payslips, taxes, and being able to work out your pensions and benefits as well. Okay, so we'll start off with visas. As you all know, after you graduate, you'll be applying for the Tier 4 General Visa under the foundation program. And basically what it is that it's just an extension of your current Tier 4 student visa. So you'll be given a different BRP in which you have to go through the whole process of getting the certificate of sponsorship as well, proving that you're eligible to apply, and you'll be granted the Tier 4 General Visa. I would say the process of applying for the Tier 4 General Visa is definitely much more straightforward in comparison to the skilled worker visa, which is the Tier 2 visa. So the Tier 4 General Visa is basically just an extension of your current student visa. And then when you progress into specialty training, there is this new visa called the Healthcare and Skilled Worker Visa, or also previously known as the Tier 2, where you will be given the certificate of sponsorship from the UK government once you have accepted your job offer. So be it as a clinical fellow or GP core training or specialty training, you will need to have a certificate of sponsorship before you can apply for the tier 2 visa. So normally once you accept the offer, the offer that is being accepted on oral goes to the UK body, the government, and they will send you a login details in an email telling you how to apply, the timelines to apply, and what are the documents that you need to upload on the system as well. And normally I would say give yourself a good 3 months preparation before you receive the actual tier 2 visa. So normally I would say that if you've already been allocated the job of your choice and in the location of your choice, normally I would recommend to just go ahead and accept the offer, because the longer you wait and until the end of the whole application cycle ends, then the later you get your certificate of sponsorship, the later you get your BRP and stuff like that. So some international students found that they weren't able to travel back to Malaysia during the 3 months wait of the new visa, because they were not sure when was the visa going to arrive or stuff like that. So definitely I would always recommend, if you have already been given the job of your choice, just go ahead, accept it, and start the application process for the tier 2 visa. Okay, and also one other very important thing is that when you apply for your tier 2 visa, it's definitely a much more detailed process than the tier 4 visa. So the tier 2 visa or the skilled worker visa, they normally ask about all of your travels, and that includes all of the travels from the date of entry into the UK. So for example, in my case, I entered the UK in 2014. I had to list all of the travels that I have made since 2014 on my tier 4 visa. So that includes transit dates, even the countries that you were only in, even the countries that you were only there for maybe 1 or 2 hours waiting for the next flight. So in a transit country, so you have to also list that down. You need to keep all of the dates of your travel, country of departure and arrival, length of stay, and what were you doing during your trip in that particular country? Were you there for tourism? Were you there for work or visiting friends and family? So it's actually quite a detailed process, and I would say a lot of people struggle when it comes to this, because nowadays all of your boarding passes are all via emails or online. You don't have the physical copies anymore. So if, let's say, if you lose access to your emails and you don't have any copies of the dates and the countries that you visited, then it can be quite difficult as well. And also because passports nowadays, they don't really stamp anymore. I think a lot of the passports are digitalized, in the sense that once you pass through the immigration barrier, you just have to scan it, but they don't actually have a physical stamp anymore for some countries at least. So yeah, I would always recommend to keep a diary of all the dates that you have traveled and why were you traveling to that particular country as well. Not only that, yeah, keep all of your passports, including those that have expired, because you will need to declare what passports have you held in the past. And also, if you're thinking about indefinite leave to remain, or also known as the permanent residence in the UK, then there's 2 different routes that you can go down. So the first one is called the long residence route, where it takes up a total of 10 years. And a lot of international students, if you come here for high school or college or medical school, then the long residence route actually is earlier in comparison to the skilled worker visa. So for example, in my case, I've been here since 2014 for medical school. So that's 5 years of medical school, 2 years of foundation training. And then I only need to wait for another 3 years of working as either a specialty trainee or a clinical fellow. So for example, I'll be able to apply for indefinite leave to remain by the end of my ST3. So that would be in 2024. In comparison to if I were to use the skilled worker visa route, which basically only starts at ST1 or IMT1 or CST1, then I would have to wait until I reach ST5 before I can apply for the skilled worker visa. So yeah, those who have already started living in the UK from high school, college, or medical school, the long residence route is definitely the earlier option for you. So yeah, I just wanted to show the pictures as well. So this is how it actually comes up when you apply and you need to list down your travel history. So they normally ask you, which country did you visit? Have you been to any other countries in the past 10 years? And then you have to list down the reason for your visit as well. So tourism or transit, and then the dates that you leave or arrive as well. So this is just an example of what you'll look like when you apply. Okay, so now we're moving on to tips about relocation. So as I mentioned earlier, what is relocation? So relocation is basically moving from one deanery to the next deanery. And when do you actually use relocation is when you've accepted a job in a different deanery. For example, I was in F1 and F2 in Wales, and I've moved all the way to the northwest of England. So that is considered as I have relocated from one deanery to the next. And in regards to relocation, the deanery is kind enough to actually reimburse relocation expenses. So we always recommend for students or trainees to save all your receipts on expenditure pertaining to relocation. So for example, on food, accommodation, petrol, and transport, you're actually allowed to claim for food as well, surprisingly. So yeah, I think they give a budget of like £30 for your dinners and £15 for your lunch. I have to double check that, but I think that was the amount that I applied with. And then accommodation as well. So for example, if you needed to stay in a hotel or rent somewhere else in the meantime while you were relocating to a permanent rental location or waiting to put a purchase on a house, you're allowed to up to 2 minimum reimbursed visits as well before relocation. Okay, and for some people, especially when you're in medical school, you accumulate a lot of items and a lot of things, and sometimes a car is not enough to fit everything, and you might need to hire a moving van. So even with moving vans, they do reimburse the moving van, but you would need to provide 3 different quotations from separate companies, and they will only reimburse the cheapest quote. So if you don't use the cheapest quote, they will only just go by the cheapest quote, even though your receipt states a higher price. Not only that, there is also a difference in regards to renting from student renting versus being a professional and renting as well. Normally, they would also require to see your previous tenancy agreements as well. So referencing is actually very, very important. And I would recommend, if let's say you're a medical student currently, keep your tenancy agreements if you're renting with either the university halls, or if you already started to rent on a private accommodation. Keep those tenancy agreements because they are very useful, as they provide references. If let's say once you graduate, you start working and you want to rent as a professional worker as well. One of the referencing websites that a lot of tenancy agents use is called Good Lord, and it's actually in that particular green color. So yeah, it's just basically a system that they ask you to upload all of your BRPs, your visas, your previous tenancy agreements. You have to provide some references as well, all onto this system called Good Lord, and that's how they check whether are you eligible to rent their property, basically. Okay, and I wanted to say another thing as well. Why is it that they go through such a thorough check for professionals rather than students? It's because for students, normally they would require a guarantor, whereas if you're already a working person and you're earning a wage every month, then you don't need a guarantor anymore for the rent, and that's why they go through such rigorous checks on whether you're able to afford the rent. So in regards to the expenditure on relocation, you have to submit the claims 3 months from when the expenditure was made, and normally it takes up to about 3 months for them to approve the expenditure as well. So it's a very long waiting period, and it's just more of a waiting game as well. Okay. So next, I'll be quickly moving on to career pathways. So as we all know, F1, F2, normally we would expect students to progress from F2 into either clinical fellow or specialty training, GP or core training as well. I mean, some people do prefer to take some time out to do an F3, F4 or F5. And there's no rush. At the end of the day, there isn't any rush to complete training. There isn't any rush to become a consultant, because at the end of the day, even after you've completed your training, you still have to work. You still have to go to hospitals and do rubbish shifts. You know what I mean? Like you're still actively working. It's not that once you reach consultant, you're like basically free. That doesn't happen. So in terms of career pathways, there are clinical fellow jobs, so either research or non-research based. There's also specialty training where you apply via oral, and it normally opens in November for ST1 and ST3. And in regards to specialty training as well, normally I'll recommend for students to look up competition ratios just to get a brief idea of how competitive the specialty is, but it shouldn't deter you from going ahead and applying to the specialty, because every year it changes. You're competing with different people, you're competing with a different pool of people as well. So normally I would say competition ratios are more of a way to gauge how competitive the specialty is, but it shouldn't stop you from applying. The next thing to look at is portfolio requirements as well. So for example, IMT, so medical training, and CST, which is core surgical training, has quite a regimented portfolio requirement that they normally look out for, and it's very easy to access. You can just Google it online, have a look at what they normally look for, and how do they allocate points as well. So normally for portfolio requirements, it's very important to have achievements in presentations, prizes, publications, or even teaching. If you've done teaching sessions, you can also put that in, and also having additional degrees such as an intercalation or a previous degree sometimes does help as well for specialty training application. The next thing I want to talk about is the multi-specialty recruitment assessment. So this is actually a new exam that was introduced a few years back, where it is an assessment where they test and see whether are you competent enough at the level of an F2 in order to progress to specialty training. And I'll talk further more about the MSRA in the next few slides. Other jobs that you can go through is the trust grade specialty. So basically this is just doing your a non-training job, and basically what you are is just more of like a long-term locum doctor, if that makes sense. So you're not in training, but you're working a regular shift and you're permanently employed for a period of time in that particular hospital as well. Other pathways such as the academic clinical fellow is also one of the other options alongside the specialty training pathway, which you can apply via oral as well, and it opens roughly around September and October. Yeah, so I've taken a picture of one of the ST1 recruitment timelines. This is the recruitment timeline for 2021. So you have a vague idea of when it actually opens. So it opens around in the beginning of November, and then it closes 1st of December. And then you see you have to sit for the exam in January, the MSRA exam, and the exam results they come out around February time. Your first offers are by 3rd of March, and then the upgrade deadlines is in April. So as I was saying earlier about applying for the Tier 2 visa, the first few offers that are released in March, if let's say if you get the job of your choice, I would say to go ahead and accept it so that you can start your visa applications. Because if you give it 3 months period of leeway, by the time you get your offers in March up to when you get your visa, which hopefully will be in June, then you have a period of like 2 months to still be able to go back and visit family if you wanted to, like go back to Malaysia or something. But if you wait till April, and the peak period of applications for visa is around June, July, then your visa might be delayed and you might only get it like end of July or early August, and that doesn't really give you an opportunity to go back and visit family. And this is how the oral website look like. So you log in, create an account, and all of the different specialty options will come up, and then you just apply to them. And normally on oral, what they normally look for is like your personal details, eligibility, fitness to practice, references. So you have to put your 3 previous clinical supervisors or educational supervisors. So get their contact details, your telephone numbers, and make sure that they are aware that you're putting them as a referee as well, because they will be expected to receive an email and confirm that they are willing to provide a reference for you. So always give them a heads up as well. And then for some specialties, you also need to put evidence or portfolio, like certificates and collection of points. Some specialties also require white space questions. So they ask you questions about why do you want to do this specialty? What makes you different from other applicants, or and stuff like that. So some specialties have white space questions, and then preferences, and then just equality and declaration as well, that you are a sane person. So yeah, moving to the specialty recruitment assessment, it's broken down into the professional dilemma and clinical problem solving. So the professional dilemma is basically kind of like your SJT, which you'll do in 5th year. And then your clinical problem solving is like the SVAs that you get in finals in medical school. So actually very similar from your finals exam and SJT. So nothing too bizarre or too difficult. And there's no negative marking. Attempt all questions and always be mindful of the time, because you don't really have a lot of time and it goes really quickly as well. And in regards to the MSRA scoring, how it's being scored is that they use like a normal standardized distribution of everyone who is sitting for the exam in that particular year. So there isn't like a minimum score or a maximum score. But normally they would have a cutoff that they look out for to deem whether applicants are in the top 10% or in the bottom 10%. So for Obs and Gynae last year, the cutoff was 550, which is actually quite okay. Some comparative specialties actually have a very high, like higher cutoff. I think for radiology it was like 600 plus or something like that. So yeah, look out for their cutoffs as well, as it changes from year to year. So in regards to the preparation for MSRA, it's quite important to know what it is. So GP Recruitment Blueprint or the MPS GP Recruitment Guide tells you about what to expect in the exam. There are also free webinars such as from BMA, eMedical, BMJ module, question banks as well, MCQ Bank, Past Medicine, eMedical. Personally, I've used Past Medicine and MCQ Bank, which were really good. I found that the MCQ Bank questions actually look much more similar to the actual exam, whereas Past Medicine, the perks of doing Past Medicine is that there it comes with a virtual textbook which summarizes all the points that you need to know. There are courses provided by eMedical as well, and also we always recommend to familiarize yourself with the format and types of questions where you can get on Pearson VUE website as well. Okay, moving on from the MSRA, we'll talk more about working in the NHS. So once you start working, it's very important to be organized and to keep all of your communications from payroll and HMRC as well, such as your pay slips, your tax codes, your P45 and your P60. So it's very important to be organized, have a folder to keep all of these documents, because in the future, when you want to claim tax benefits and when you want to calculate your tax code, you need to have all of these documents with you in order to claim anything back. So I've listed a couple of accounts where you can, so tax, you can even check your taxes based on the GOB website, and pay slips. They have a really good explanation of pay slips on the BMA website as well, which we'll go through much later in the slides. Not only that, once you start working, you also need to pay for indemnity fees. Normally they recommend at least one indemnity body, so either MPS or MDU. And then the GMC and specialty training fees you have to pay as well. It's not cheap, I would have to say. I think specialty training fees for Obs and Gynae at least was around 200 or 300 pounds a year, and you have to pay that fees every single year just to keep the national training number. Not only that, the portfolio doesn't end. Once you go into specialty training, you also still need to do your CAXs, your CBDs, reflections, logbook as well, and your OSATs, which is basically skills that you have done, kind of like your DOPS in foundation training. Okay, so with payslips, there are two different types of payslips that you may come across. If you're in Wales, they may follow the 2002 pays, whereas in England and Scotland, they use the 2016 payslip guide, which is the one that I have here. And basically, if you can look at the colored words at the bottom or under description, that is where you would normally have to look out for whether they have added all the night duties that you have done, the weekend allowances, the on-calls that you have done, and also whether your basic pay is correct. So always make sure to check. Don't just accept the payslip blindly. People in payroll do make mistakes. So yeah, definitely always check. And if you find that anything is different, definitely raise with payroll and make sure that they change it in your next pay or reimburse you the amount in the next pay as well. Not only that, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, so the NHS, there's two different contracts. 2016 contract is the one for Scotland and England, and then in Wales, we still use the 2002 contract. So for in Wales, we use the 2002 contract, which looks at banding. So when you go into a particular rotation, they classify it as either band 1A, 2B, 2C, which basically talks about how many percent of the unsociable hours are being taken out of your normal working rota. So that's for Wales. Whereas I've only included the England one here because I'm supposed to be talking about working in England. So I've only uploaded the 2016 contract here. So for doctors in England, they go by the nodal point system. So F1, F2, the pay is listed on the screen. And then for CT1, CT2, and ST1, ST2, basically we make the same amount, whether you're on specialty training or core training. And then as such with ST3 to ST8 as well. Okay, and then I'm just going to go briefly on the levels of care in the NHS. So we all know that in the NHS, there's a very distinct identification for primary care and secondary care. So primary care basically means that you're being taken care of in the community, and that includes GPs or NHS Direct or boots or dentists, pharmacies as well, and opticians. So that is taking care of patients in the community. That's primary care. Secondary care would basically mean involving the hospital. So going to hospital for A&E, arriving in an ambulance, seeing specialists in hospitals, or being awarded onto the wards, that is all secondary care. I'm just going to lightly close the talk talking about more of pros and cons of working in NHS for international students. So for me personally, at this current time, I would say that I would prefer to stay on in the UK to complete my training. Why? Because the UK has very structured specialty training pathways. There's pros and cons to that, but I would say having a structured pathway at least guides you and tells you what you're to expect in the next few years and how are you going to work towards being a consultant. So I particularly like that system. Also, there is the working hours, where is the 48 hours EWTD or European Work Time Directive, where it's quite strict to a certain extent, where you're only allowed to work up to 48 hours a week. I know certain other countries, they abuse their doctors and doctors end up working 70 to 96 hours in a week. So one thing that I really appreciate about working in NHS is that they are quite strict on the 48 hours a week. And if you were to work overtime, then you're open to apply for exception reporting as well, where the hospital will get fined for keeping you in the hospital longer than the hours that you were rotated to work. Not only that, there's also a set pathway to attain the indefinite leave to remain, or also known as the PR. And also being a doctor and working in NHS, you do enjoy some NHS pension and benefits as well. And the NHS pension is supposedly to be one of the best pensions out there for people working in the UK. And also you have access to the NHS, you get to use the NHS as well. And also the recent removal of the immigration health surcharge, which really benefits a lot of international graduates or international students. And also the UK offers great opportunities for CV building, such as bursaries, which you can apply for, conferences, prizes, courses, workshops, where you don't really see much of them in foreign countries. Cons, however, of working in the NHS, I would say, is that you're most of the time alone, in a sense that your family is back home and you're here in a foreign country by yourself. So you're unable to spend time with family. You might feel homesick, staying away from home as well. And you really do miss the opportunity to watch your parents grow old. I can remember going back home after staying in the UK for a couple of years in medical school. And then you go back and then you see your parents, and they have aged so much. So it's quite heartbreaking. It never gets easier as well whenever you leave home again. Yeah, it never gets easier. Not only that, if let's say if you were to get married and start a family in the UK, because you don't have your larger family based in the UK with you, it can be quite difficult. If let's say if you have a new baby or young children, it can be quite difficult to juggle both working and having a young family or starting a family when your parents are not here to support you as well. So that can be quite difficult. I guess for some people, it's also the uncertainty of the future. Where is NHS going? Whether working back home makes things much easier, much more straightforward. So there is that uncertainty of the future as well. And one thing that I realized among international students or international graduates is that long distance relationships. So one of the cons of staying on and working here is that perhaps you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife who's waiting for you back home in Malaysia for you to complete your training, and it's all about juggling the long distance relationships and stuff like that. So those are the cons. Yeah, I think that's the end of my my talk. I know that was a whistle stop tour of everything in regards to working in the NHS. But if anyone has any questions, I'll be free to answer after the last presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rucira. Honestly, that was super, super incredible. We had an amazing talk from Jean about university life, and I think it sort of transitioned really, really well into the talk about specialty training and understanding the NHS, adapting to it. You, of course, I think you had an amazing transition, you know, to life in the UK, and that was great. You had like so many opportunities throughout the way. I love the advice about the visas because it's not spoken about. You know, it's really not spoken about. People don't know about it, and it's great. I'm actually I didn't know about the requirement about the traveling. I'm gonna start putting down all of my traveling from now on, so that it sort of eases my work down the line. But yeah, thank you so much for an amazing talk. We'll answer all of the questions in the end as well. And I think that leads into a good transition into Dr. David's and Dr. Tim's talk about professional development and finances. So really,